Let's stand up, do what we do on Sunday, greet about 5 people we've not spoken to this evening. Welcome somebody. All right, you can get a seat. How many enjoyed this morning's session with Dr. Mortensen? We're going to jump right in. This is session number 2. We're honored to have you. Dr. Mortensen, it's all yours.
Well, good evening. How many of you were not here this morning? Any of you? Okay, a few. So I do work for Answers in Genesis. Are you familiar with Answers in Genesis and the Creation Museum? A little bit. Well, we built the Creation Museum in northern Kentucky, but we're not there. I can see it there, but not here. What's wrong? All right, there we go. So 70,000 square foot museum on 50 acres and beautiful gardens and walking trails and a place for the kids to enjoy things. And then inside we've got a 4D theater where you put on some of those special glasses to see 4-dimensional. I don't know how they do that, but a planetarium. We just redid it about a year ago, so it's really vivid colors. And then a reconstruction of the ark, 1% of it built to scale, and a big room where we talk about geology and Noah's flood. We've got animatronic dinosaurs, real dinosaur fossil. It's been valued at $1 million. It was professionally prepared and given to the museum. And life-size dinosaurs sculpted by our buddy Davis, who went home to be with the Lord recently. And so we show how the evolutionary view compared to the creationist view. We talk about human origins. We have insects from all over the world. We talk about what the world was like in the time of Jesus, just packed with information. You couldn't read or see every video in the museum in one day. There's so much to learn about the origin of life in terms of in the womb, and how this whole issue connects with what's going on in our culture. We present the gospel. So just a lot you can see and do in the museum. And then our ark, which we opened in 2016, it's about 45 minutes from the museum. So you can't really see both places in one day. But we've got 132 bays on 3 decks, and we show people how they could have cared for the animals and lived, and we answer people's questions, and there's things for kids of all ages. And we've got a wonderful zoo there as well, and you can even ride a camel. So just a lot to do. It's an all family, all ages can really enjoy and learn from the what we've got there at the Ark and the museum. So, all right, tonight we want to talk about dinosaurs. Have you and your kids been brainwashed? Dinosaurs are really popular today. We've got a lot of dinosaur toys. We've got dinosaur books, lots of dinosaur books. In fact, we have so many dinosaur books, we can't get them all on one slide. And those books have 2 things in common. They're teaching the kids about dinosaurs, and they're teaching them about evolution in millions of years. And most parents don't know what to do with the millions of years in evolution, so they buy the books for the kids and let them learn about dinosaurs, and the kids are getting indoctrinated in the process. But it's also the adults. National Geographic Dinosaurs take wings. The origin of birds. Most evolutionists believe dinosaurs evolved into birds. That's how we got birds. And here's an article in 1999. Feathers for T-Rex. We'll look at that in a moment. But whenever we're speaking about dinosaurs or speaking about creation, one of the questions that always comes up is, well, how do you fit dinosaurs into the Bible? And when people ask that question, what they're really asking is, how do you fit the fact that dinosaurs lived millions of years before man, and they were these vicious meat-eating creatures that ripped other creatures apart? How do you fit that into the Bible? And the answer is really easy. You don't. You don't fit the evolutionary interpretation of the fossil evidence for dinosaurs into the Bible. Instead, what we need to do is use the Bible to help us understand the dinosaurs. And we're going to do that tonight. But first, I want to show you what the evolutionists say about dinosaurs. Here's a chart from Encyclopedia Britannica, which is not a Christian publication. And they're showing you that the first dinosaurs evolved into existence about 245 million years ago. The first ones were kind of small, and then they evolved into the really big ones, and then they all went extinct about 65 million years ago. Here's another chart from Encyclopedia Britannica. And they're showing you that all the different kinds of dinosaurs and all the different varieties of alligators and crocodiles, they're all descended from a common ancestor, an archosaur. I can't show you a picture of that because I went on the internet to look for a picture, and I found 3 or 4 or 5 different versions of what the evolutionists think archosaur looked like. But then the rest of the chart shows you that they believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. And in this case, they say Archaeopteryx was the transitional form, part bird, part reptile. The problem is there are birds found deeper in the fossil record that all evolutionists agree are 100% birds. So Archaeopteryx really can't be the transitional form. Plus, there's good evidence that Archaeopteryx was just a bird. Well, a few years ago, I was speaking in Bozeman, Montana, and I went to at Montana State University. They have the Museum of the Rockies, which arguably is one of the best dinosaur museums in the country, maybe even in the world. Lots of dinosaurs, and of course, under every dinosaur exhibit, they said something about millions of years. And as I finished going through the museum itself, I was heading back to the lobby, and I came to this television. And the television had a video of birds taking off and landing and splashing in the water and preening their feathers. And above the video television, there was a sign. And you can't read the sign, so I'm going to show you what it said. It said, "Birds are living dinosaurs." Well, I've got news for you, folks. Birds are birds. That's playing language games to say birds are dinosaurs. Well, Richard Lewontin is a leading evolutionist in the United States. He published an article in Scientific American showing a comparison of dinosaurs that they believe evolved into birds. And he says, evolution of birds from reptiles can be considered a process of adaptation by which birds solved the problem of flight. But now think about that sentence. If they already were birds, they already knew how to fly. And if they didn't know how to fly, they didn't figure it out. Because if it was that easy, Orville and Wilbur Wright wouldn't have had to do all those experiments. So he really should have said by which reptiles solved the problem of flight, but of course that would be even worse. But he compares the bones. They're different. The bird bones are hollow with a crisscrossing structure. That allows their bodies to be very light, which is great for flight. Dinosaur bones primarily are not hollow, and so there's a big difference. Their forelimbs are similar in the sense that they have the same bones. They have the same bones that we have in our arms. But the dinosaur has very short arms, and the bird has very long arms. Their sternum is similar, but noticeably different, and their skin covering is different. Dinosaurs, like all reptiles, have scales or scutes. Birds have feathers. And there's a big difference. Those are scutes on the feet of chickens, crocodile scutes, and dinosaur skin sometimes is fossilized, and we can see that it's just the same structure. And that is very different from a feather. And feathers, when we look at them under the microscope, is even more different. This is magnification a couple thousand times. There's a system of barbs and barbules. And so when you pull down a feather, it pulls it apart. When you go up the feather, it zips it together again. And that's because this structure right here is on a hinge. And so it swings over onto that other structure, and that's how the feather gets hooked together. Very complex structure, nothing like the scutes or scales of reptiles. There's another thing about birds, and that is that all birds preen their feathers. They have an oil gland in their rear end, and they can turn their head back there and reach it, and then they oil their feathers, which keeps them waterproof and helps them to take care. So they spend a lot of their day preening their feathers. No reptile has ever been found to have anything like an oil gland. So there's just a huge difference between scales or scutes and feathers. There's another difference between reptiles and birds, and that is that all reptiles, including dinosaurs, have a two-way breathing system, and they have a diaphragm to push that air in and out of their lungs. But a bird has a one-way system and no diaphragm. Their breathing system is unique among all animals. Now think about this. The air goes into the lung, and then it doesn't go back out the same way. It goes into some air sacs, which pump the air through, and some of the bones, and then out through the lung again. Now think about this. You can only miss a couple breaths, and then you're dead. So how do you change a one-way system into a two-way system and have the creature survive? That's not going to happen. Now, evolutionists have proposed two theories for the origin of feathers and flight. One was the ground-to-air theory. The idea here was that a reptile was running along. He was trying to catch some food, and his arms were kind of flapping in the wind, and the scales got frayed on the edges, and then he just took off. But, of course, do you realize how long he would have to run? He would starve to death. So that idea was abandoned in about 1983, first advocated by a leading evolutionist. So the more popular view is the air-to-ground theory. And the idea here is that there was a reptile up in the tree, and he thought to himself, you know, there's got to be a lot faster way to get from this branch on this tree over to that branch on that tree than to crawl all the way down this tree, across the ground, and up the other tree. And so he just jumped. Of course, the first experiment would have been a disaster, because if he hadn't figured out gravity, and if he didn't understand the motion of the branch he was on compared to the motion of the branch he was going to, it would have been a disaster. And if he survived, he would say, you know, that was really stupid. I'm not doing that again. And if he didn't survive, his son would have said, Dad was really dumb. I'm not doing that. But here's another theory for the origin of feathers. It's what I call the keep warm theory. And the idea here is that dinosaurs evolved feathers to stay warm. We're not sure what that first dino bird looked like. We're just speculating here. But we would like to suggest that it might have been something like a triceratops. But it's got to evolve the feathers on the whole body to keep warm. It won't do any good if it just evolves feathers on one wing. Well, Alan Fiducia is a world expert on birds. He teaches at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And this is what he thinks about the keep warm theory. Indeed, the simplest and most profound objection to all thermoregulatory, that's keep warm theories, is why feathers? Feathers are extremely complex, both structurally and embryologically. So as the feather is developing in the egg, it's massively complex, and then once it's fully formed, it's massively complex. So although he's an evolutionist, he doesn't think that's a good idea. But in 1999, November, National Geographic had an article with a full-page picture, feathers for T-Rex, and in big, bold letters, new bird-like fossils are missing links in dinosaur evolution. Notice the verbs when evolutionists talk. Are, not might be, not could be, not we suggest, are. Well, you open up the article. Oh, I forgot to point out, you can see the down feathers on the baby T-Rex. But you need to realize that's not a photograph. That's a painting based on evolutionary assumptions. But you open up the article and they've got this picture of this dino bird, and they say, we can now say that birds are theropods just as confidently as we say that humans are mammals. Well, what's a theropod? Well, they don't show you in the article, so I'm going to show you. That's a theropod. And once you see that, you see there's a problem, because that theropod has very short arms, and the dino bird has long wings. But they say, we are just as confident that birds are theropods as we are that humans are mammals. Well, are humans mammals? Yes. We give birth to live young. We feed our young milk. We have hair. We're mammals. We're more than mammals because we're made in the image of God, but we're not in the reptile category or the bird category. Well, they said, we're just as confident that birds are theropods. Well, they said that in November 1999. But in March of 2000, just 4 months later, National Geographic published a little letter in the letters to the editor at the beginning of the magazine by a Chinese paleontologist who said in so many words, I hate to inform you of this, but the fossil on which you based that article was a fraud. It was the parts of a reptile fossil and the parts of a bird fossil very cleverly glued together by Chinese farmers. Well, National Geographic had egg on their face, and so they commissioned an independent investigator who published an article in October of 2000, and it's stuck in the back of the magazine. There's no beautiful full-color pictures, hardly any large font statements. I doubt very many people who saw this article read that article, because most people don't read National Geographic. They know that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and National Geographic has beautiful pictures. But that article is really interesting to read, and it just says should have never happened, but it did. Well, that was 2000. In 2003, Discover Magazine interviewed Dr. Alan Fiducia, the one who made a comment about the keep warm theory. And they asked him, well, what about all the other evidence for feathered dinosaurs, besides the Archaeoraptor there in National Geographic? And Dr. Fiducia, the evolutionist, said, when we see actual feathers preserved in specimens, we need to carefully determine if we are looking at secondarily flightless birds that have retained feathers and only superficially resemble dinosaurs, or if the specimens are in fact related to dinosaurs. That's a difficult issue to deal with right now, given the existence of fake fossils. Oh, well, now that raises an important question. So far, only one feathered dinosaur, Archaeoraptor, has been publicly acknowledged as a forgery. You think there are others? Dr. Fiducia. Archaeoraptor is just the tip of the iceberg. There are scores of fake fossils out there, and they have cast a dark shadow over the whole field. When you go to these fossil shows, it is difficult to tell which ones are faked and which ones are not. I have heard that there's a fake fossil factory in northeastern China, in Liaoning province, near the deposits where many of these recent alleged feathered dinosaurs were found. Well, it's difficult to interpret the fake fossils, and it's also expensive if you get it wrong. That Archaeoraptor fossil cost $80,000 at a trade show in Utah. But Fiducia goes on, journals like Nature don't require specimens to be authenticated. And the specimens immediately end up back in China, so nobody can examine them. They may be miraculous discoveries. They may be missing links, as they are claimed, but there's no way to authenticate any of this stuff. If you want to authenticate it, you have to spend a lot of money and time to fly to China, and then you've got to hope that the Chinese authorities will let you look at the actual fossils and not a plaster cast representation of the fossils. Another paleontologist at the University of Kansas said this about that fraud. At the moment, I don't trust any of these specimens until I see the x-rays. The whole commercial market for fossils has gotten riddled with fakery. And yet, the Chinese keep making the announcements. Feathered fossils prove birds evolved from dinosaurs, say Chinese scientists. But actually, the only way that we know for sure scientifically to get feathers on a dinosaur is to glue the feathers on the dinosaur. And that's what they're doing. A friend recently sent me a picture when he was at the Memphis Zoo with lovely dinosaurs with feathers all over them. But that's not science. That's not what the fossils show. And the problem of fake fossils in China is serious and growing. Rather than being excavated by paleontologists on fossil digs, most of the region's fossils are pulled from the ground by desperately poor farmers and then sold on to dealers and museums. So they find the fossils, but they're not trained to properly assess what rock layer this is in, where was it found, so that the geologist can make a correct interpretation. And though many more fossils are being discovered, they are collected and prepared in a way that destroys much of the scientific information. Another much more serious problem, however, is posed by fake and manipulated specimens. It sounds crude, but even experts have to look carefully to detect the trickery when master forgers have been at work. Well, right at the time of that National Geographic published fraud, Dr. Storrs Olson, who is the curator for birds at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., he is also an evolutionist, but he said this: "The idea of feathered dinosaurs and the theropod origin of birds is being actively promulgated by a cadre of zealous scientists acting in concert with certain editors at Nature and National Geographic, who themselves have become outspoken and highly biased proselytizers of the faith in evolution. Truth and careful scientific weighing of evidence have been among the first casualties in the program, which is now fast becoming one of the grander scientific hoaxes of our age, the paleontological equivalent of cold fusion." So to change a dinosaur into a bird, you've got to do more than just develop feathers. You have to change the breathing system, the skeletal system, the digestive and nervous system. You've got to construct beaks and bills, and you've got to master the art of nest building. Now, we do know from the fossil evidence, we have good reason to believe that dinosaurs laid eggs in nests, because we find sometimes clutches of dinosaur eggs together, sometimes with baby dinosaurs still in the eggs. But they didn't make nests in trees. That's an additional skill. You have to learn to fly and navigate, and there are some birds that spend the summer in Alaska, and before they leave for Hawaii to fly in a nonstop flight, they eat enough food so that they can lose 60% of their body weight as they make that journey. There's another bird that spends the summer in Greenland and flies nonstop to the southern tip of South America. Scientists don't know exactly how they do this. Are they migrating by the sun? But how do they do that on a cloudy day? Are they migrating by the magnetic field of the earth? They're not sure. And then you've got to develop sound-producing organs and learn songs, and each bird species has a different song. And then you've got to shrink the dinosaur to make the first bird, and then shrink the first bird to make most of the other birds. Here's an article from evolutionists showing steady shrinkage over 50 million years. Really? If you believe that reptiles over 50 million years just gradually got smaller and smaller so that they could eventually evolve into birds, you've got too much faith in the evolutionists. I submit to you the idea that a dinosaur evolved into a bird is impossible. But the evolutionists want us to believe that. And here's a chart from a book on dinosaurs published in conjunction with the British Museum of Natural History. I have this in my library. And they show you crocodiles, birds, pterosaurs, flying reptiles, and different kinds of dinosaurs up at the top of the diagram. And then you can see that there are two colors of lines, yellow and gray. Well, what do those mean? Well, the book tells us the yellow lines indicate solid fossil evidence. Okay, well, if the yellow is the solid fossil evidence, what are the gray lines? Well, they're not solid fossil evidence. They're no fossil evidence at all. So let's get rid of them so we can see the actual fossil evidence. And that looks like crocodiles have always been crocodiles, birds have always been birds, and different kinds of dinosaurs have always been different kinds of dinosaurs. Just like the Bible says, God created different creatures after their kind. Well, you can see on the chart that up at the top, at 65 million years, all the dinosaurs disappear, but we still have crocodiles and birds. So what happened to the dinosaurs? Well, the evolutionists have proposed a number of theories. One, they ate too much. One, they didn't eat enough. One, they had a massive gas attack. But the most popular view is the asteroid impact. That there was an object that hit in, they think they found the smoking gun, hit in the Gulf of Mexico. They think they found the crater. And that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. But you have to not only explain the extinction of the dinosaurs, you have to explain how they got buried in sedimentary layers on every continent. You can't just explain how they all died. You got to explain how they got buried. And Peter Makovitsky is an expert on dinosaurs at the Chicago Field Museum. He said this in 2007. The truth is, Makovitsky said, scientists don't really know what happened to the dinosaurs. Each hypothesis on its own doesn't fit the pattern very well. Was extinction gradual or sudden? The lack of data doesn't allow us to answer the question. Well, that was 2007. You might say, well, good grief, it's 17 years later. They probably have figured it out now. Well, they didn't in 2019. National Geographic tells us the cause of the mass extinction that marks the end of the Cretaceous, that's when the dinosaurs went extinct, they say, and the beginning of the Paleogene is a scientific mystery. They don't know. So they don't really know where dinosaurs came from, and they don't really know what happened to the dinosaurs, and they surely don't know that dinosaurs evolved into birds. So let's consider what the Bible has to say to explain the dinosaurs. And the first question, of course, is, well, when did God make the dinosaurs? And the Bible's very clear about that. They were made on the sixth day of history. And you say, well, now wait a minute. I've read Genesis 1. It doesn't say anything about dinosaurs. Well, you're right. It doesn't say dinosaurs. But it also doesn't say dog or hippopotamus or elephant. But I know they were made on day 6 because God says he made all the land animals on day 6. And dogs and hippos and elephants and dinosaurs are land animals. So I know they were made on day 6. God expects us to use our brain when we're reading the Bible. Well, I've got photographic evidence anyway. Here's a rare photo of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Hey, that picture is just as good as the evolutionist picture. The only difference is I have eyewitness testimony that they were there on the 6th day. God Almighty. The evolutionists have no eyewitnesses to see when the dinosaurs came into existence. But how do they know what color they were? Well, that's a really good question. And the answer is, in most cases, we have no idea. because we don't find fossilized skin. It's very rare. Now, they're developing ways that they can figure out what they might have looked like. And they could have all been dull green like alligators and crocodiles, or they could have been wild colors like that, because there's lots of reptiles and amphibians that have wild colors. But what did T-Rex eat on the day he was created? Well, if we listen to the evolutionists, we'd have to say anything he jolly well pleases. But we want to think biblically. So on day 6, would T-Rex would he have been considered a herbivore, a carnivore, a omnivore, eating both plants and animals, or all of the above, or none of the above? Well, the correct answer is herbivore, because in Genesis 1, on the 6th day after God created Adam and Eve, he said to them, I've given you the green plants for food, and I've given all the animals the green plants for food. And so those teeth and dinosaurs could have been used very effectively, lots of plant material. I mean, even with a dull knife, it's tough to cut a tomato. And so those sharp teeth with serrated edges could have been used very effectively to eat plant material. And you say, yeah, but wait a minute. Sharp teeth are proof the creature ate meat. No, sharp teeth are proof that the creature had sharp teeth. You can go on YouTube and watch an alligator eat a watermelon. And in research in 2013, they reported that nearly 3/4 of crocodilian species, crocodiles and alligators, eat fruit frequently and intentionally. Here's the skulls, or the jaws of 6 varieties of bats. They all have a different diet. One of those jaws goes with a bat that eats only blood. One eats only fish. One eats fruit. One eats insects. One jaw goes to the bat that eats nectar and pollen. And one jaw goes with the bat that eats small mammals. Now, which jaw is it? Well, if we never saw any bats alive and we only had the fossil jaws, we'd think they were all meat eaters. But it's only B that eats the small mammals. Here's 2 jaws, skulls, very similar. They have good, strong molars, nice, sharp canine teeth. The top one is a fruit bat that eats only fruit. The bottom one is a wolf that eats meat. Squirrels have sharp teeth and sharp claws, but they're almost strictly vegetarian. And a hippo and a sloth have some pretty nasty teeth to bite into things, but they're vegetarian. A bear exhibit at a zoo in Sydney, Australia said, although all bears have teeth designed for eating meat, their diet consists mainly of plants. Well, think about that sentence. If their diet consists mainly of plants, why don't we say that they have teeth designed to eat plants? I mean, that's what they eat. And there's one bear that has very sharp teeth and sharp claws, and he's strictly vegetarian. He's the panda bear. And he needs those sharpened teeth and claws to eat that tough bamboo. So on day 6, people and the dinosaurs and all the other animals were vegetarian. Well, if dinosaurs lived with people, why don't I find the word dinosaur in the Bible? Well, that's easy to explain. The reason it's not in the King James Bible, which was translated in 1611, is because that was long before the word dinosaur was invented. It was invented by Sir Richard Owen, a famous British scientist, in 1841. It means terrible lizard. So that's 230 years after the Bible was translated. Well, why isn't it in our modern translations? Well, because our modern Bible scholars have been more or less influenced by evolutionary millions of years thinking, and so they're not looking for any evidence in the Bible that might point to dinosaurs. But there is a Hebrew word in the Old Testament, tanin, and it appears many times. Now, the Bible doesn't classify creatures the way modern scientists do. Dinosaurs are technically land animals, But in Isaiah 27, it talks about a flying creature, and it uses the word tanin, and its description sounds like a flying reptile. Technically, that wouldn't be a dinosaur, but a flying reptile. And in Job chapter 38, Job talks to Job about his suffering. You know, he'd listened to Job and his friends for 37 chapters, trying to analyze why he suffered all these things. And then God starts to speak to Job. And he asks him a whole series of questions. He asks him in chapter 38 and 39 about snow, hail, rain, ice, frost, clouds, lightning, constellations, war, the lion, the raven, the mountain goat, the donkey, the wild ox, the ostrich, the horse, the locust, hawk, and eagle. And clearly, these were things that Job saw. In fact, many times God asked the question, now look at this. Do you know about this? Do you know about that? And then we come to chapter 40, and he talks about another creature. In chapter 40, verse 15, behold now, behemoth, which I made as well as you, he eats grass like an ox. Behold now, his strength is in his loins, and his power is in the muscles of his belly. So whatever creature he's talking about is a creature that has really strong stomach muscles, really strong leg muscles, and he's vegetarian. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. So he's got really strong bones. And he is first among the ways of God. Evidently, God is talking about the greatest land animal in Job's day. Well, what creature was this? He's already talked about all these other creatures that Job saw. This must be another creature that he saw. Well, I left out one verse, verse 17. He bends his tail like a cedar tree. If you look in the marginal notes of study Bibles today, you'll read something like this in the Ryrie Study Bible, usually believed to be a hippopotamus, or the NIV Study Bible, possibly the hippopotamus or the elephant. But whoever wrote that marginal note either hadn't been to the zoo lately or he wasn't paying careful attention to verse 17. Because there is the cedar of Lebanon. It's one of the biggest trees in the Middle East. And when that tree moves in a heavy wind, it doesn't go like that. It's going to barely move. Now, kids, you're going to have to help here because your parents won't know the answer to this question. There is a tail that would move like a cedar tree. Have you ever seen an elephant with a tail like that? No. Have you ever seen a hippopotamus with a tail like that? No. But there are creatures that had tails like that. They're called sauropods, the long-necked dinosaurs with the long tails. And just in case you have not been to the zoo lately, that is an elephant tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And that is a hippo tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And when you see it going like that, you would be very wise to stand some distance away, because there will be something else moving from the same location. And it won't be pretty. Well, in chapter 41, he talks about Leviathan, which is evidently the largest sea creature that he made. And he says, out of his nostrils goes smoke, and a seething pot of cauldron, his breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. Well, surely this is mythology. Of course. Is it? We've got electric eels that can give you a shock and kill you. We've got fireflies that produce light. And we've got bombardier beetles. Have you ever heard of the bombardier beetle? The bombardier beetle is just a little beetle. And it has the ability to make two different chemicals in its body. And when it senses that it might be the lunch for a toad or something, its little brain sends a message to its body: shoot those two chemicals into a combustion chamber, add a catalytic converter to speed up the chemical reaction to make a noxious gas at the boiling temperature of water, and then shoot it out of the two cannons that I have in my rear end, which can swivel 180 degrees sideways or up or down. And so they use that to defend themselves. Now think about this. How could that evolve? I mean, even if he somehow by accident evolved the chemicals, if he didn't have the brain power to know to shoot those chemicals into the combustion chamber, nothing would happen. He'd be lunch. And if he figured out how to make the catalytic chemical to speed up the reaction, if he didn't have the cannons, he'd blow himself up. Now, if God can make a little bombardier beetle that's alive today and can do that, I don't have any trouble believing that there could have been a creature that could mix chemicals in its head, and maybe even land dinosaurs, because there's some skulls that have some chambers in their head that scientists don't know exactly what those were for. So on day 6, we had hippos, elephants, and dinosaurs. We have hippos and elephants today, so what happened to the dinosaurs? Well, we go back to the Bible. And the Bible says that the world started out very good. No death, no disease, no natural disasters. Man sinned, and that brought the judgment of God on the whole creation. But the evolutionist view says there's been millions and millions of years of death and disease and suffering before man came on the scene. But Genesis says that after Adam and Eve sinned, God cursed the serpent, and he cursed the animals with the serpent. And so we don't live in that very good creation anymore. And Paul says that we live in a groaning creation. It's waiting, eagerly waiting, as we are for the resurrection of our bodies. The rest of the creation, Paul says, is eagerly waiting to be liberated from its bondage to corruption. And it will be liberated, Paul says in Romans 8, when Christians receive their resurrection body. So we don't know if it happened instantly or gradually, but some creatures that were originally created to be herbivores became carnivores. And we see evidence in dinosaur bones of cancer, brain tumors, and arthritis. That had to be after the fall of Adam. And the world became very wicked, and so wicked that God says, I'm going to destroy the world with a flood. And he told Noah to take 2 of every kind of land, animal, and bird onto the ark. And as soon as we say that, non-Christians scoff. Sadly, Christians scoff. And they say, well, there's no way you could fit the dinosaurs in the ark. Well, you couldn't fit that dinosaur in that ark, but that wasn't the ark. It wasn't a little bathtub. So that's why we built the ark according to the dimensions given in the Bible, to help people see how big this really was. But still, people will object. How could you fit those dinosaurs into the ark? Well, we need to know a few facts about dinosaurs. The first is that not all dinosaurs were large. Some were no bigger than a chicken. Second, we need to remember that dinosaurs are reptiles. Reptiles never stop growing. So here you have a little alligator or crocodile coming out of the egg, and you could stick your finger in his mouth and it would just tickle your finger. But that thing is going to grow, and you don't want to stick anything in his mouth. The largest dinosaur eggs we've ever found are only a little bit bigger than a football. So the great Potosaurus, the great T-Rex, they all started out small. And then scientists have studied the growth pattern in dinosaur bones, particularly the really large sauropods, and they discovered that they grew very little in the first few years of their life, and then most of their growth was in a very short period, and then they didn't grow very much after that. So if Noah took dinosaurs on the ark when they were young, and we need to remember, the Bible tells us that God brought the animals to the ark. Noah didn't go out and collect them. So God would bring young ones to the ark, so they'd be small, they wouldn't eat much, they wouldn't produce as much waste, and after they came off the ark, most of their growth would be after the flood, and they'd have lots of time to produce babies. The evolutionists have now identified about 550 genera and 1,000 species of dinosaurs, but almost every dinosaur discovery gets a new species and genus name. And so they're just multiplying species. But here are two skulls that are remarkably similar. They not only have a different species name, that's the second name, Latin name, they have a different genus name. So they're put these two skulls, never seen these creatures alive, but they put them in two different genuses. But there's less difference between those skulls than there is between those dog skulls. And they're all the same species, Canis lupus. So Noah didn't have to take two of each of those ceratops on the ark. He just took two ceratops. And the difference between those ceratops is probably the result of just genetic variation or mutations. Again, there's less variation between those ceratops than there is between those dogs. And Noah didn't take any of those dogs on the ark. We know because they're the result of artificial breeding by humans over the last 300 to 400 years. So he just took two of the dog kind on the ark, and two of each kind of dinosaur on the ark. And from studying the published literature, we think there were probably only about 50 to 80 dinosaur kinds. Some of them small at full maturity, all of them small when they were young. And anything not in the ark perished. Creatures which could run to higher ground would, but eventually there wouldn't be any higher ground, and they would be swept away by the flood waters and ripped apart in the violence of those waters. And so we would expect to find from that flood billions of dead things buried in rock layers that were once soft sediments of sand, silt, clay, mud. We'd expect to find evidence that those layers were deposited by water. And since it was a global flood, we'd expect to find that evidence all over the earth. And the miracle of miracles is that's exactly what we find. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. We find every continent is covered with thousands of feet of sedimentary rocks containing billions of fossils. And there are dinosaur fossils on virtually every continent. Well, Tim Clary is a PhD geologist at the Institute for Creation Research. He's written a whole book on dinosaurs. And he says, we have repeatedly shown that dinosaurs are commonly found mixed with marine fossils across the globe and often buried in so-called marine rocks. Well, think about that. If they're buried with sea creatures, they obviously are not buried where they lived, because dinosaurs don't live in the ocean and sea creatures don't live on the land. They got all mixed together by a flood. Now, usually they only find a few bones, and they're often crushed, broken, separated. Sometimes they find a dinosaur where most of it is intact. That's pretty unusual. But when we find something like that, we know it couldn't have been buried slowly over thousands or millions of years. Because if that creature had been walking along its favorite path and then it just died of old age, it's laying on the ground, wolves, coyotes, other creatures are going to come and eat that carcass, and then they're going to chew on the bones. There won't be any evidence. You've got to bury the creature rapidly to cut it off from decay processes. Sometimes we find fossilized skin. That again speaks of rapid burial and fossilization. We find dinosaur footprints. Again, if you've ever been to the ocean and walked along the sand close to the ocean, it doesn't take too many waves to come up and wash away your footprints. So you've got to bury the footprints in some more sediment to preserve the footprints. It's not uncommon that they find dinosaurs like this with their head thrown back. And scientists interpret that as death in the throes of water. They're dying of asphyxiation. They're trying to get breath. Here's another example of that. And in this provincial park in Canada, 10,000 dinosaurs, they estimate, buried there. You don't have 10,000 dinosaurs living all together. They're buried together, not where they lived, but where they were buried. Yes, but if humans and dinosaurs lived at the same time, why don't we find dinosaurs buried with or humans buried with the dinosaurs? Well, I think that's easy. I wouldn't expect human beings to be running next to a dinosaur as they're trying to escape the floodwaters. Humans are smart. They're going to run to higher ground. They're going to hang on to a tree or a log. Dinosaurs are just going to run in fear, trying to get away from the water. So the dinosaurs are down there in the rocks, no humans with them. We don't have dinosaurs living today with humans, as far as we know, although there's some very tantalizing testimony of people living near the deep jungles of the Congo or in Papua New Guinea, where they have reported seeing creatures that when they describe them to a Westerner, it sounds like they've seen a dinosaur, but there's no proof, and we can't fly over those jungles because the canopy is so dense you can't see what's on the ground. They could be still alive, but let's say that they are extinct. That means that we've got supposedly 65 million years of sedimentary layers where there are no dinosaur bones and no human bones. So that proves that they never lived together. No, it doesn't. The coelacanth was a fish known only from the fossil record. It disappeared from the fossil record in the same layer as the dinosaurs disappeared. And so evolutionists said it went extinct with the dinosaurs. Up above that, no coelacanth fossils. So they said it went extinct until 1938 when they found the coelacanth swimming off the coast of Madagascar in 400 feet of water. And when they compared the living coelacanth with the fossil, it was virtually unchanged. Hadn't evolved in supposedly 65 million years. They've since found coelacanth off the coast of Indonesia and Japan. And then more recently, they said, well, actually, it wasn't missing through all those layers. They found it in a layer that they said was 17 million years old. Now, we have coelacanth on the earth today, but we don't have coelacanths and humans in the fossil record together. Why not? Well, because humans don't live at 400 feet below sea level. But we're living at the same time, and we could be living at the same time with the dinosaurs. But let's assume that they went extinct. The question then is, well, why did they go extinct? Well, we called the Cincinnati Zoo a number of years ago. They have an endangered species program, and we said, well, why do creatures go extinct? And they said, well, man overhunts them, man destroys their habitat, brings disease into their population, maybe a natural disaster destroys their food supply. And we said, well, why did the dinosaurs go extinct? And they said, well, we don't know. And we just thought, well, why couldn't it be the same reasons? That man overhunted them, that man destroyed their habitat, that man brought disease into their population, or rapid climate change in the post-flood world. But they might not be extinct. Remember the coelacanth. And why did they become extinct, if they did? Well, Mary Schweitzer was a graduate student at the University of Montana, or Montana State University, back in the 1990s. And she was in the lab with her lab assistant, and they were looking at a slice of T-Rex bone under the microscope, and they couldn't believe what they saw. They saw what looked like red blood cells in that T-Rex bone. And she describes it this way. It was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. But of course I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? She couldn't believe it. Why couldn't she believe it? She couldn't question the millions of years. If she questioned that, her scientific career would be over. So she had to say, well, maybe somehow blood cells, which are very fragile, could survive. We don't know how. Well, that was 1993. She went on and got her PhD. Last I knew, she was at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She's become quite an expert on this. She's found more dinosaur bones with soft tissue and blood cells and other things. Here's a video from Discovery.
Not going to believe this, but when she picked up a small piece to stop the reaction by putting it in water, it stretched and it shrank and it moved all over the place. So we knew we had something pretty unusual.
It appears to be soft they're even more surprised.
Out popped the blood vessels, and they were pretty incredible. And I said, I don't believe it. That's not possible. We need to do it again and again. It's one of those just goosebump-inducing scientific moments. That's all I can say. And they don't really happen very often.
Blood vessels should not exist in fossilized bone. Many scientists believe organic molecules can't last more than 100,000 years. Yet Schweitzer's bone is 68 million years old.
I think the presence of soft tissues and cells indicates there's a process going on that we didn't have a clue about. So I think it means that we have to kind of rethink the whole chemical process of making a bone turn into a fossil.
Now, I think they need to think about a process going on somewhere else, up here. Their assumptions. They need to question the millions of years. But they keep finding this stuff. Tiny, delicate vessels that carried blood through a duck-billed dinosaur 80 million years ago, never fossilized and still contain the beast's tissue, a new study finds. Brian Thomas is a PhD scientist at the Institute for Creation Research. He has a PhD in paleobiochemistry, so he's really specialized in this question. And he's been collecting from the scientific published literature all kinds of examples of soft tissue, all the way through the fossil record, all the way back to what the evolutionists consider the beginning of life. And it's just amazing what they're discovering. Incredible detail. This is magnified enormously. And this is bone. Evolutionists will never date dinosaur bones with carbon-14 because the maximum you can date anything with carbon-14 is about 50 to 100,000 years, and they believe the bones are millions of years old, so they'd never waste the time and money to try to date them. But creation scientists have dated dinosaur bones, and they have found measurable amounts of carbon-14 in those bones. Now, these carbon-14 ages are not the correct age. We're having to use evolutionary assumptions about the decay rate and the production of carbon-14 in the atmosphere. We don't have the scientific evidence yet to know how to calibrate the carbon-14 dates. But the very fact that there's carbon-14 in these rocks, in these bones, shows they're not millions of years old. There's more evidence that dinosaurs and people live together. Almost every culture in the world has dragon legends. The Chinese are most famous, of course. And in their zodiac, they have all these animals that they obviously have seen, but one of those is a dragon. Why wouldn't that be a real animal that they once saw? The flag of Wales has a dragon on it, and there are lots of stories of people encountering dragons. There's a petroglyph in Natural Bridges National Monument in the southwest United States that bears striking resemblance to a dinosaur, specifically a brontosaurus with a long tail and neck and small head and all. And there it is. And here's a guy bringing out the relief. Now, there are other animals carved there too, and our archaeologists believe they were carved by Native American Indians a couple thousand years ago. The question is, how could they draw that picture if they'd never seen the creature? Dinosaur fossils were only discovered in the early 19th century, and when they found them, it was a single bone. They didn't know what it was. There's a temple in the jungles of Cambodia, a very famous temple. In one of the arches to the entrance, it has a bunch of animals there, including a stegosaurus. How in the world did this artist carve that creature if he never saw them alive? There's a tomb in Carlisle Cathedral in England. Bishop Bell, an Anglican bishop, is buried there in the floor. And, there's the tombs in the floor of the church. And around the edge of the lid is a brass band. And on that brass band are carved some animals. A bird, a fish, and a dog. And what looks like two long-necked dinosaurs. How in the world did the artist carve that in 1496 if humans had never seen those creatures? Again, As far as we know, nobody knew anything about the dinosaurs before the 19th century. But here we see similar images in an artifact in Egypt, 3000 BC, and an artifact in Mesopotamia from over 3000 BC. It just looks like a sauropod dinosaur. Well, we have today what evolutionists call living fossils. These are plants or animals that the evolutionists said went extinct, and because it disappears from the fossil record. And this Wallamite pine, as it's called, went extinct 150 million years ago, they said, until 1994, when it was found growing in a secluded valley west of Sydney, Australia, just less than 100 miles from where they found the fossils. And this is a replica in a little museum, and they've got a sign at the bottom. The discovery of the Wallamite pine is the equivalent of finding a small dinosaur still alive on the earth. Well, why wouldn't it be equivalent to finding a really large dinosaur still alive on the earth? They could still be there in some of those deep jungles. Well, we live in a world today where people say the Bible can't be trusted in this scientific age. Why do they say that? Well, because we've got cell phones and computers and refrigerators and cars. That's why people can't trust the Bible. No, that's not why people don't trust the Bible. It's because of the teaching of evolution in millions of years. Those ideas have just been bombarding the Bible. And one of the ways evolutionists get that across is through books on dinosaurs and movies like Jurassic Park and all of the natural history museums. And the non-Christian world says, I want to see what the church is going to do about this. And most of the church around the world just says, well, just trust in Jesus. Don't worry about the dinosaurs. And some Christians even say, there never were any dinosaurs. That's a satanic deception. No, there were dinosaurs. We found their bones. So we need to have answers. And in the teen adult library pack that we have out there, we still have a few left. But this book talking about what's happened in our culture and how it relates to Genesis, and a book on training parents, how to teach their children to stand strong in this increasingly hostile culture against Christianity. Creation to Babel, its commentary to help you understand the first 11 chapters and help you understand answers to the most common objections given by Christians and non-Christians to believing those chapters. And then the Gospel Reset book that explains that the gospel never changes, but the barriers or obstacles to people believing the gospel change, and evolution is the biggest barrier. In the New Answers book in that pack, we have one whole chapter on dinosaurs to help you learn an answer when people raise that objection. So those are still available. And we also have the kids library pack with 8 books for the little kids answering 20 questions each. One of those is all devoted to questions about dinosaurs. And then the books about gender for boy and girl, and a book on the gospel based on the ark, and a book on racism, and a full book on dinosaurs. So those are all available. And then we still have the super packs, which combines those 2 library packs and adds a book about suffering and a book about the flood. And so if we've run out of those, there's a QR code out there. You can order the same pack online at the same price. And then we've also got our magazine, and this issue right now has something related to dinosaurs, but it comes 4 times a year, a kids magazine and a teen adult magazine together, and you get the digital subscription free, and you also get that book free when you subscribe. And then you can buy the kids magazine separately and give it to a grandchild or a neighbor child, and great articles with fun things for them to do and learn, and you get that book free if you subscribe to the kids magazine. So you can sign up for that in the out there in the book table. Our newsletter is free. You can sign up for that on the little form on the tables. We've got lots more articles on our website about dinosaurs and videos dealing with dinosaurs in our answers.tv. And in our museum, again, we've got dinosaurs that with information about them so you can learn about them. We've got fossils. And then out at the Ark, we do have just a couple of dinosaur-type creatures in cages just to make the point that they were on the Ark. And so I encourage you to pick up a brochure and plan to visit. So we like to call dinosaurs our missionary lizards because they help us explain the gospel. The reason we know about dinosaurs is the fossils. And fossils are dead things. Why is there death? Because of sin. What has God done about sin? He sent the Lord Jesus Christ to solve the problem of sin by his death and resurrection. So we use the Bible to explain the dinosaurs. They were made on the sixth day, only thousands of years ago. They were all originally vegetarian, no death before the fall, and the fossils are the result of Noah's flood. And so we need to build all of our thinking on God's Word. Not just our thinking about morality or the gospel or God, but our thinking about the world, including the world of dinosaurs. Okay, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about human origins, and I'll show you some more ways that we're being deceived.
How many have enjoyed this? All right. Kind of makes you get a little different view on Jurassic Park, right? Listen, just the thought that there's possibly dinosaurs alive. Dr. Morrison, if you knew the hunters that we have in Gaston County and what that potentially could mean. You talk about big game hunting. Any of you guys in with me? Where's your faith, you bunch of chickens? Yeah, all right. Listen, we're going to take about a 10-minute break and come right back for the final session this evening. So greet one another, take a quick restroom break. And by the way, the resources out there, we had several. I cannot believe the number of books that were going off the table. If you want to get something, you have till tomorrow night, but make sure you pick that up. 10-minute break. We'll come back here and kick off session 2.